And welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fightful Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Toro, and joining me today is the one and only, and I do mean one and only because he is the first ever three-time Fightful Boxing Podcast guest. Marquis Johns is back, and we're doing this in video for the first time. How's
Looking
it
forward to
feel
it,
over
Carlos.
there in Tampa?
Pretty good, Carlos, man. Three times the charm as always, man. Looking forward to doing this with you on this one during talking some boxing goodness during a time where we may get some fights. They've announced some fights that no one wants to watch, and then we get everything else along the way.
Yeah, so first of all, I hope everyone is safe or in their quarantines. So hopefully everyone is practicing social distancing and not trying to get everyone sick. I myself am stuck at home. My hair is a mess, as you can see. I'm starting to grow a beard, but that's because I forgot to shave right before we came on the air, and I was like, screw it. I don't care if I don't care. I don't care at this point. At a point where I should care about my appearance, I'm just like, you know what? It's not as bad. I'm wearing my Puerto Rico jacket, my Puerto Rico shirt, my hoodie. I love this shirt, and you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna be chill. We're gonna be talking about Nicaraguan boxing. So
Yeah, no, we're fine. It makes me feel any better. This is the rally goatee I usually carry during baseball season, since I haven't got the same haircut you have in the last 4 to 6 weeks at this point. And it's weird because the way my face is set up on video, you guys can look at this. This doesn't get any farther than this. It just comes in all scraggly and it turns gray. Surprised you cut me before I had to push the kid in, so we're good to go.
So obviously, you live in Tampa. I live in Cleveland. Right now, I kind of hate your city because you guys got Tom Brady. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns are still the Cleveland Browns.
Well, Carlos, it could be worse. Here's what happens with the Bucks. The Bucks have been trying to bootleg and copy the Patriots' strategy for years. That goes back to when they hired the greatness of Greg Schiano down here, and we all know how that turned out, unfortunately. So we picked up Brady. Grant, we picked up Tom Brady at age, was he 42 at this point, 43? Better late than never, I guess. We'll see if we can do the whole Joe Montana thing and get this team to the playoffs. Luckily, they got Gronk with them. They got some weapons around them.
You got 24/7 champion Gronk. You got to give him the proper respect. 24/7 champion. I'm excited. I'm just waiting at some point of the season, and I can just picture it. Bucks go to New Orleans. It's in the fourth quarter. Tom Brady is about to hike the ball. You got Gronk on the left side, and all of a sudden, you just see Drew Brees coming in, just smack Gronk with a chair, pin him, have one of the NFL referees, because I think the rule is there has to be a referee. I don't think they ever specified it has to be a WWE referee. They count the pin. Drew Brees is your 24/7 champion. I'm waiting for that to happen.
You know what? I'm willing to pull this ultimate swerve on you. I think it's going to be happening in Miami, and it's going to be the Miami Dolphins mascot. They're going to have R-Truth or one of these random WWE guys in the mascot uniform. He's going to pin. He's going to run around with the belt. He's going to take the helmet off. It's going to look weird. I can see something along those lines happening, but the fact that Gronk still has that belt and they're acting like he doesn't have that belt is amazing to me. He's got to get that belt off at some point, right? Like, what are we doing with this? I know it's during these times it's hard to walk around and pin people out in public, but you got to get that belt off more or hold another tournament. I mean, how hard is that?
Hold another 24/7. Everybody has to face each other 24/7. You know, at the end of 7 days, whoever doesn't get pinned is the new champion.
It can't be any simpler than that. I mean, we're not in WWE creative, but it can't be that hard to put on paper, right? Like, at some point, someone has to just conjure up some of these things. I know they don't have much in terms of viewership and or people paying attention to actually do this stuff or actual wrestlers at this point. A lot of these folks are still, like everybody else, being stuck in their house, but they have to arrange something. I'm actually looking forward to it, actually. I'm sure you saw the story as well, that they're doing this whole weird Money in the Bank WWE studio cinematic thing again. So, I mean, they're gonna have to, because you can only have so many matches without any studio audiences. And I'm trying to figure out, Carlos, I want to throw this at you as well. Speaking about that, WWE has been well known and well documented for putting sound in, right? You mean to tell me they don't have any footage of crowd cheering and or booing on any of these tapes on the network? They can't find any of this audio?
See, now, I will defend WWE in that one because that I don't know if you ever seen like weird like 80s 90s indie shows on VHS where they have like where they actually have a crowd and they just pipe in like extra crowd noise
Oh
in post.
yeah.
I gotta tell you, it's way worse than just
Okay.
having no crowd noise. I actually prefer this than just coming in and bring it in just on speakerphone, just bring in all the fake crowd noise. I actually kind of prefer the way they have it now because, have you ever seen like a Herb Abrams UWF show? It's bad.
Yeah, that stuff is pretty bad, and that stuff is atrocious. And I want to say that's one of the upcoming Dark Side of the Ring episodes. I'm actually looking forward to seeing how much. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how much they got of that because that stuff was horrendous. And I think one of those shows they filmed was, I want to say, in Daytona down here. That's about 4 hours from me tops, and it's like, oh, you're like, no, it is not. That UWF stuff is not good stuff.
Oh, yeah, man. It's not great. But hey, you know, I wanted to bring you in. As much as we love to talk wrestling,
yeah,
I wanted to bring you in for a couple of reasons. One, wanted to talk to someone who also covered, or at the very least, watched this card from Nicaragua that I referenced earlier in the show. Because it is as far as I can remember, it is the first boxing card, at least on this side of the world, that has taken place and has been televised since this entire mess started. Since, like, what's the last televised boxing? It was the Showbox show in Minnesota, if I remember correctly.
In the States, it was the Showbox card. That Saturday afterwards, there was a card in Chile that Dragonfire had with I want to say they had like that Saturday. That's the official last card was down there. Outside of that, no, unless it's been unsanctioned or on World Star Hip Hop, no, those are the last fights we've had going.
And speaking of Dragonfire Boxing, later in the show, you're actually going to listen to an interview I did with Andres Campos, the undefeated Chilean prospect, who actually fought on that card. So it's very nice unintentional segue you just there, Marquis.
Anytime, Carlos, but yeah, no, Campos is a good-looking prospect, by the way. You guys got to check that interview out, actually, because if he fought anything like he did in that last fight down there, where he won by a pretty wide decision, that fight wasn't even close. He's one to look out for.
I agree. He is someone. He's 9-0, already in 10-round bouts, and is already holding a couple of WBA and WBO regional titles. I think he's going to be someone to watch out for in the flyweight division. Maybe not in 2020, 2021, but I think maybe as he matures and starts to grow into his body a little bit more when he turns like 26, 27, that's when it's going to be dangerous to watch out for. So I'm excited to see how his career unfolds.
No, he's one to keep an eye out for, actually, and it's weird because like the media down in Chile, like because a few stories I covered with those guys during some of the Campos' early fights, they picked up on it. So there's a guy that they're keeping a very close eye on in terms of how he moves up the ranks, and yeah, about 2022 would be one to keep an eye out as well. It's interesting because Dragonfire is having a lot of camps down there as well as in Australia. Is that they're slowly building a worldwide empire on the other sides of the globe outside of the U.S. It's kind of neat to see.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Dragonfire is a company you should watch out for in the near future. But going back to the card in Nicaragua, for those who don't know, ESPN Deportes, which is the Spanish language channel in the U.S., they aired a boxing card from Nicaragua, and it is the first boxing card, as I mentioned, first live boxing card that was televised in the United States. And I gotta say, I came into this show, and by the way, there were I believe 5 out of 8 fights were televised on ESPN Deportes. And I came into this card with no expectations whatsoever. I'm like, it's a rematch from October, 2 guys who aren't really that good. One half of the main event is on a 4-fight losing streak. I was just really happy to just get any boxing. And about midway through the card, I kind of started thinking to myself, this is a good card. This is actually, and I may be grading on a curve, but I'm actually genuinely enjoying this card.
No, the card, Carlos, on Saturday was actually really good. And it's weird because if you looked at the card on paper, like you went through box record, just like looked at record totals, it's like, okay, it plays out like a standard club show where it's like, okay, we're going to get a couple of squash fights, couple of bad heavyweight prospects. Freddie Fonseca was on here getting an easy victory and stuff like that. I was like, oh boy, here we go. But no, actually the fight card was actually really good. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned like the main event was that rematch, and it's weird because I don't know if you saw the story behind it, but that rematch was sanctioned by commission, obviously, because of the weird circumstances of the first fight he was knocked out, and then all of a sudden the ref was like, all right, we're done here. And it's like, really? Like, it's one of the worst stoppages I've ever seen on actual tape, and there's actually tape of it. It's like, ooh. So I'm glad they replayed that fight back. But no, this actually was a really good card even for a club show. Like, I mean, usually when you go into a club show, Carlos, I don't get your perspective on this. People always have like the same feeling where it's like either you expect to see the competition on terms of like either like tough man competitions or like charity fighting events where you see like, you know, cops versus firefighters or the fire department, stuff like that, where it's like, all right, these guys really aren't Golden Gloves ringers or amateurs at all. They're just here to swing and see what happens. But no, this actually raised my bar on a lot of that stuff. It's funny because this card was actually pretty good, which is weird because there's a card they announced that yesterday in Poland with Marcellus Walk facing a guy I forgot who was still fighting, and Kevin Johnson actually, who's still fighting at age 40, mind you, who was last seen Carlos, as you well know, sleeping against the ropes against Martin Bacoli. So we'll see how that shapes up. It's also on Poland pay-per-view. I'm kind of disappointed about that.
The funny part is on if you were to translate convert the Polish price, it's less than $5.
That's still too much.
but I'm thinking like, you know, how often are we gonna get, first of all, this train wreck of a show?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and also it's live boxing. I'm like, I'm almost at the point where I am okay with just about anything they bring out. And I'm like, if it's Mariusz Wach and Kevin Johnson in a $4.80 pay-per-view main event, I've spent more money on worse things. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I've wasted plenty of TV KO pay-per-views on dropping $20 on a lot worse entertainment. So, and it's only interesting that it's like less than $5, but I'm really intrigued to see how this is going to look like on the bootleggers market for this fight, because for every person that wants to pay the $5 in America, there's about 12 that's going to find it elsewhere. And I'm always intrigued on how that's going to look, but it's going to be in Polish. So we'll see how this all shapes out at the end. But my thing with us, Carlos, I want to ask you this as well. Like, in terms of these fights that are staging with these studio shows, we obviously we all know that, because some fighters already came out already said like, hey, I'm not fighting with the atmosphere of crowds and fans like Furman and Crawford and several others. Like Hearn came out this week, said Anthony Joshua came out. And he's like, you know, it's not good for the Joshua brand to fight in the studio show. We get all that. I mean, we're not expecting that because there's money involved. There's too much money to be fighting with no gate. So I mean, it's duh. So it's like I get that. My question to you is, how many more of these tuna fights in terms of like Johnson and Walker are we going to get before we get an actual championship fight that we actually can like tell people that haven't seen boxing since the quarantine started, hey, there's a guy fighting that you may have actually heard of, and he's fighting in the main event this weekend. I'm kind of waiting for that card to come out. I'm hoping in June with Top Rank, because Top Rank has said they're making like 2 or 3 cards a week, mind you, which I think is going to be interesting. That's a little excessive, I think, but we'll find out. In terms of who we're going to having seen some of these main events, but at this point it really can't be no worse than what we got going on now. So I'm willing to find out, but as long as guys are ready to fight, we're here.
By the way, I apologize to anybody who's listening to the, I guess, fire trucks or ambulances going on outside. I live right next to a hospital, so that is a common sound that I listen to on a regular basis. But yeah, so right now, after that Kevin Johnson Mariusz Wach fight, Matchroom still technically has the George Kambosos Jr. and Lee Selby fight, and Dillion White versus Alexander Povetkin, and what they had a card on July 11th that I'm completely blinking out now.
It's the next gen card, right? I want to say.
I think it was the next gen card. Or at least a part of the next gen card. And then you got on July 4th also Joe Joyce versus Daniel Dubois. I don't know why I blanked out, but Jojo Daniel Dubois. Those cards are still technically on the schedule. They haven't said anything about those cards. I don't even know if they're still selling tickets or anything. I have no idea. But they're still technically on the docket.
There's a possibility. I'm intrigued, especially since that Joyce Dubois card, which I'm surprised Frank hasn't scrapped it yet. Knowing him, I mean, if he can't get a gate or an outdoor venue for that thing, I don't know, worried, because I don't see that being a studio show at all. So I'm really intrigued. It should be. No, that's the one thing I will give Hearn credit for, because he came out on the IFL, as he usually does, rambling for hours upon hours, mind you. But the one thing he did mention in all of his in one of his diatribes was that he mentioned the Joshua brand in terms of like having the image of him fighting behind people. I get all that. I mean, it's the old cliche where, you know, it's prize fighting. We gotta see people behind, but in terms of the atmosphere with that, you can't have your legacy being known as, hey, remember that guy? Remember the time that Joshua lost and there was no one around to see it? You know, you don't want that stigma on there. You gotta have, you know, Andrew Louise in the crowd or something. So I get it, but yeah, I'm really intrigued on what. Wow, I'm really. It's funny you mentioned those things are actually still on the board. Maybe folks in the UK are doing something that we don't know about yet, but nothing up there is up and running yet. Like, I think they've already pushed back like their premier soccer season. I think memory serves me well already. So if there's no actual live sports in Britain like it is in the US, where they're contemplating having baseball here, that doesn't sound feasible considering that the local team here is furloughing employees, mind you. So it's like, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, when there's no corporation sports like that, or they've already talked about the NFL being delayed till October already. I mean, it's hard to see that these fights in July are going to be somehow still on the board. But time will tell with that.
And not only that, I'm right now reading the British Boxing Board of Control's latest statement on the thing, and they said they're hopeful that pro boxing commences in July. And right now they've said initially it is unlikely that crowd attending promotions will be permitted. So that already kind of maybe not officially puts the shish kebab on George Kambosos versus Lee Selby, because that's in June, late June.
Yeah.
And there's no way maybe I'm wrong. There is no way in hell, or at least they shouldn't. There's no way in hell that Eddie Hearn is going to allow Dillion White, Alexander Povetkin, and on the co-main event, Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor be done in front of no fans. It makes no sense whatsoever.
No, that's too much money being lost on that.
Not just that, three quarters of your main and co-main event live outside of England. So we have no idea if they're going to be allowed to even fly, or if they fly, how long do they have to be in quarantine for?
Yeah, so that's right. Because Serrano's in New York. Like, she can't go out of the state with that stuff. Anyone who's flying out of New York City adjacent at this point has been giving like the 21 questions salute when you fly off the plane at this point for any regional travel in the U.S. domestic. It's interesting. My boss at my job, who was working still at the office actually, flew in from Brooklyn like last week, and he got off the airport like on Wednesday afternoon. And they gave him literally like the TSA shakedown, like, hey, have you done this? Have you been exposed to this? Where have you gone? Like they've all but not given him a tracking device on where he's been the last 48 hours. So if he killed somebody, they're gonna find out real quick. So nonetheless, yeah, it's gonna be tough with times of travel with that. I think also as well with Matchmaking, believe it or not, I think Chisora Usyk is still on the docket. Actually, I want to say that was for mid-June. I'm surprised they haven't pushed that back yet, but that's another one.
I don't think they've. I could be wrong, but I don't think they've officially announced it. I think they were saying, yeah, it's going to be for this date, but I don't think there was a formal announcement. Well, wait, I think there was. Yeah. I think there was this. It's been so. It almost feels like eternity since we talked about fights like these. And in reality, we've only been through this for 6 weeks. But it feels like closer to 6 months.
It might as well be 6 years, because all these fights we're just mentioning were like fights like, all right, looking forward to this one, and this one. And then they just did this pandemic just swiped all of it out. And it's like, all right, all this is going to be on the back burner. We'll get to these fights when we can. Now it's like, well, is there a possibility we can now, or do we know? We still don't know either way. And it's interesting with a lot of these fight cards. We'll see if they can do these things without having an actual crowd, which I'm going to be honest with you, Carlos. I'm in the minority on this. I know people have been saying for the longest, like, oh, they fight for with no people before. But it's like, once you get to the professional level like this, you kind of want people in the background. Even if it's just your parents, you want someone back there to say, either cheer or boo. Like, that's why we're not getting like any championship fights, and we're getting, these studio shows like this where it's, the essential personnel and the important people. unless they can stack all these cards in Nicaragua, because because essentially, Carlos, we're all working up to getting to that's the blueprint essentially, where they have the crowd, everybody's spaced out, the whole movie theater seating thing where you have the seat next to you and the seat next to you spaced out, and you sit next to each other. You have the guys in the mask, you have the ring card girl with the mask, you have the ring announcer with the mask, the refs mask, everyone's up the fighters with masks are on. So, and I saw that, I think weren't they hosing people down to walk into the place? I thought that was kind of interesting too, where they had
they were at least taking temperature with one of those machines that like it scans your forehead and it tells you if you're good or not. And they were definitely like hosting down every square inch of the building. And speaking of that card in Nicaragua, it's funny. As we mentioned, the card is actually really good. So I really quick running down Brian Perez versus defeats Lester Lara by TKO in the second round with just what I would say is a sensational left hook that just kind of started everything in the second round for Brian Perez.
Yeah, once he hit that hook, that fight was pretty much a wrap. It was interesting because actually he was looking kind of shaky until that hook landed, and it was like, all right. And then that happened, and it's actually one of the that was the knockout of the night. Actually, if memory serves me well, that was the only knockdown of the night. There was a stoppage.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that stoppage in just a second. Before that, we had Byron Castellon against Elias Elgaso. Byron won by unanimous decision. I'm pretty sure no scores were actually announced, but the amazing number, and it's a number I still can't believe, but it makes sense when you actually think about it. This is the 7th time these two have fought in the pro ranks, and this was Castellon's first win against Gasso. I'm still like flabbergasted by the number, but the thing is, this was a fight contested at 105 pounds, and the problem is, if you're not from Thailand, if you're not from Japan, if you're not from Asia, and more specifically, if you're in the Central America, Latin America part, and you're a 105-pound fighter, good luck getting fights, because you're not getting any. Like, if you go to BoxRec, there are 8 fighters from Nicaragua competing in the 105-pound division. So it makes sense when you have 4 or 5 of those guys face each other 3, 4, 5, 6, and in this case 7 freaking times. It's understandable. It's bizarre, and I gotta say, this was a neat little gem. This is a good fight. It's almost to the point where like they face each other so many times that they kind of know each other almost like the back of their hand, and that more often than not, that kind of tends to lead into a pretty good fight if both guys are willing to trade.
Yeah, it was actually. And it's funny you mentioned that these guys fought 7 times. They don't fight that much in women's boxing with the same matchups and problems with weight classes. That's impressive, actually. I forgot about that. But no, it was actually a pretty good fight in terms of minimum weights. Yeah. I forgot the guy was 105. It's like, wow. But no, it was interesting with that fight itself where they were throwing, and it was something with that. There, you can actually hear them physically getting involved with it, which is interesting because obviously with the social distancing stuff, it wasn't obvious a sellout crowd or anything like packed to the gills at this place, but you can just slowly hear like the noise coming down from the rappers of where these guys are coming from. It's like, oh, because I think like the place they had the venue they had this fight card at, Carlos. I'm guessing this like it looked like it was set like for like just like general assembly like basketball or concerts. Because it looked like here in Tampa, it looked like the USF Sundome here, or well, it's called the Yingling Center here, but it's where those basketball team plays. It's a university campus. It looked just like that, even down to the same scoreboard, actually, mind you, which is pretty funny, actually. But so it was weird that they had like the spacing with all of that set up, and you can still hear people with that. And I think that's what a lot of other boxers were talking about, like the main guys who are holding championships and Crawford and Furmans and whatnot are talking about, like, hey, you need this fight atmosphere behind us to get behind the crowd and whatnot. And some of that's cool. I mean, some of it sounds like Rocky IV, but, it makes sense at the end of the day with stuff like that. But no, back to this fight. This fight was actually probably, for me, actually, it may have been the best fight in the card. Now I'm looking back on it. Just in terms of just.
It's one of the two. It's between that and the main event.
You know what? Yeah, it's a toss up with that because I did like the main event actually. So yeah, but no, this was actually that's how good this card was though. It's one of those things where it's like for once there's not a clear cut like all right, this card is clearly this one fight now. There's so many of those that are going to come up down the pike now where it's like no, the main event is this, and it's like all right, this should be one-way traffic. Let's see how long this lasts. And then we get stuff like this, and it's like, all right. But yeah, the fact that there's not a lot of minimum weights in Nicaragua is pretty impressive, actually. But you would have thought they would have had someone like in neighboring countries travel through, but apparently they couldn't have anybody come down. So that's the scenario with all of that.
Yeah. Gabriel Escalante defeated Mario Mairena by TKO. On paper, this was by far the biggest mismatch because Escalante was 12-0 heading into the fight, and Mairena was 2-19-1, 15
right.
losses by KO, is 38 years old, and Mairena was actually winning the fight in the first 2 rounds. And I'm thinking to myself, this might go down as one of the most bizarre, given all the circumstances, this might end up being one of the most bizarre fight cards in recent memory, and that might have been like the final nail in the coffin on just the bizarreness of everything, where you have a 2-19-1 guy beat a rising 12-0 prospect. But Escalante ended up winning the fight. He stopped Mairena in the 5th round. This was weird, but overall, not a bad fight.
It wasn't bad actually, and it's weird because Escalante, as you know, is the prospect undefeated facing the 2-19-1 sounds harsh, man. I like what they do like on like other shows in the States. 22 card fight veteran. I love that a lot. Now that always cracks me up. It's like jeez, man. But no, it's weird because if no one has ever seen Escalante, I implore you guys to check the video footage of this out. Actually, he looks kind of like this fight compared me so much to Sebastian Fendora versus Daniel Lewis on the Wilder Fury card, because
don't remind me of that fight.
It was a little better. It was a little better than that per se, but just the sheer size of Escalante was just like towering over him, and it's like but he was able to get inside, and he was able to use his jab on him. It was like, oh man, like when's he gonna figure this out? Then the 5th round was over, but it's like, this was weird, Carlos, actually. But I was thinking with fights like this, you see fights like that on paper, and it's like, all right, this went to the 5th round, right? You'd think that's kind of a disappointment, you would assume, because usually with records like that, you'd expect something like the 2-4 minute fights at most. Usually you don't expect these things to go more than like 2 or 3 rounds, but he knew his angles a little bit to get around from some of those shots. That's why he was winning the first 2 rounds, but just he got caught up with after a while. It's like, oh man.
Let's see, we got the co-main event, Freddy Fonseca, not Francisco Fonseca, as some people, I legit saw some people on Twitter say, wasn't he the guy that fought Tim Farmer or something like that? Like, no, they confused him with Francisco Fonseca. He defeated Alain Aguilar by TKO round 5. This fight, there was nothing to this fight except, bizarrely enough, the start of the 5th round. You had Aguilar on his stool. He was sitting down, didn't want to come up. The referee starts counting as if he was down or took a knee, but he was still on his stool, and counts to like 7 or 8. Then the referee kind of acts like he's, I guess, waves it up. He didn't give a clear indication. Then he kind of goes up, and then Aguilar gets up, and then there was no clear communication as to what the hell just happened. Turns out I guess he was counting out, even though I don't think the referee ever counted to 10 technically.
I don't think he was up to 10 actually on that, and it's strange because I think he counted to 10 and he was sitting on the stool. It's like, yeah, maybe it was just ref's first day at the job apparently. But if they don't get up off the stool, there's no need for a count. He's not getting up. It's over. I'm guessing he was waiting for his trainer to either to throw the towel at him or something. I don't know, but that was. It was weird in terms of that, but it was funny that people were really confusing. Like, isn't this the guy that got knocked out by Ryan Garcia? Like, no, this is the guy that got beat up by Jojo Diaz. This is that one. But it was interesting because Fonseca actually looked halfway decent for the most part, but it also showed the disparity in competition, Carlos, in terms of this fight. Clearly, where it was like, this guy was facing through. Aguilar was throwing these left haymaker wide punches that looked like something I seen out of Roadhouse.
I was watching and I'm thinking to myself, how the hell is this fight still going on?
Yeah. At some point I thought Fonseca was just going to line him up at some point and just end this, but he couldn't. But Yeah, he kept throwing like this looping left hook, and I was like, there is no way he's going to land this. Like, I don't know what fight he's won with that, because you're trained to fight,
He's
use
won
what you know.
8 fights. I want to know who are the 8 people who lost to him.
And has the check cleared on all those 8 of those victories. That's where the sketchiness of some of these questionable records comes in. But
no, and heading into this fight, he was on a 4-fight win streak.
And who are the people he was facing? Like, I mean, Freddie Fonseca isn't exactly a world beater here. We all saw that against Jojo Diaz. And actually, he was coming up a loss himself, actually, out of London against, Joe Jose Lunares, I want to say. It was some Frenchman I saw. That's on you.
Yeah, John Joe Nevin.
Yeah, Nevin, where Nevin was pretty much just jabbing him to sleep. That footage on YouTube somewhere on the archives up there. But yeah, when I was like, okay, like, oh, all right, well, great to see Fonseca got a win somewhere. I don't know what this means down the line for him, but it was cool to see. Interesting. I was watching on Boxing Twitter, like the few people that I know who are the real diehards are like, they found a Fonseca for this card. Like, yeah, that's him. It's him. They'll need to see that. But yeah, definitely wasn't Francisco. Definitely wasn't the strongest fight on the card either. But it was just fun to see that he was out there nowhere, and people were like, well, he's wearing the same trunks he wore at the Jojo Diaz fight. He always wears those trunks, guys. That's his uniform. Yeah. It's okay. It's boxing shorts. It's okay.
Lastly, Robin Zamora defeats Ramiro Blanco a second time, this time by unanimous decision, 77-75 on 2 of the 3 scorecards, 78-74 on the third one. I said it earlier in the show, I thought this fight was pretty good. It definitely makes a case for best fight of the night. These guys were just training left and right. Now, this wasn't God Award or anything like that, but yeah, let's be honest. On paper, you would assume this would be a far worse fight than what we ended up seeing. I like this fight.
I like this fight a lot too, and there was a lot of inside boxing with this one too. That I love a lot of that, especially in the middle rounds, or especially on the 5th round as well. And it's like, oh, these guys are willing to trade. Where it's like you'd think one guy would like catch this guy, but you can just see I guess because these guys are familiar by that point in the fight, these guys were familiar with each other's, how much they could take with these guys' shots, and it's like, all right, so they were just like pretty much just throwing tit for tat. It was like, okay. No, there was one of the few fights because I went to the scorecards and there was one of the few fight cards I was trying to do my translation. It was like, all right, 78-74, 6-7-5. Like, okay, yeah. I mean, the scorecards are fair. I don't think this was a draw or anything like that. I don't think this fight was that close. I think it was a clear victory. And it was just neat to see that these guys were just willing to trade, and they actually played out the fight card out for once, as opposed to what they did the last go around with this fight, where it just stopped randomly for no apparent reason.
Yeah, and that about wraps up for that card. I mean, I thought this card was good. And listen, as much as we would love to see these boxing shows, these major fights happen, it kind of got to a point where I'm starting to think to myself, I kind of want to see if I can book these shows better. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this, by the time you're listening to this, the new edition of the Fightful Boxing newsletter is out, and you can see an entire section dedicated to this. But I wanted to have some fun, and that's the second reason why I wanted to have Marquis Johns here, is that I wanted to see what we can do with fantasy booking interpromotional events. So the way I have it set up is we have one promotional entity versus another promotional entity, and it could be any fight. It doesn't matter, doesn't matter, take the politics out of it, whatever you want, so long as those two the fight card is just entirely consisting of those two promotional entity, and it's you can make it between 6 and 8 fights. And you can read my full thing. We're doing a couple of them here, but you can read the full thing on Fightful.com on the Fightful Boxing newsletter. So it's basically about as clear cut as I can get regarding the rules about that. So one thing I wanted to see is how would each of us would book a PBC versus Matchroom boxing card, and this includes the US and UK branch. You're not restricted to either of them. You can combine both. So my card, and not necessarily in this order, but you can. So I had a 7-fight card, and I'm reading from my phone right here. Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. It's no brainer. Yeah. Andy Ruiz versus Dillion White. Adam Konoski versus Alexander Usyk. David Benavidez versus Calum Smith. Ray Vargas, who did sign with PBC, even though he hasn't fought for PBC. And Murajan Akhmadaliev. Jermall Charlo versus Demetrius Andrade. And this might seem a little bit out of left field. Jared Hurd versus Israel Madrimov.
That's not bad, actually. Funny you mentioned that because in terms of my PBC versus Matchroom fight card, I got kind of the same ones as you do, actually, to an extent. Except for I have Luis Ortiz versus Dillion White. Now, I want to explain why, actually, because I first fought Luis as well for a second. But then I realized that I'm taking Wilder at his word at face value for this, where he's saying that Luis Ortiz is the boogeyman. And I'm beginning to think about this because Dillion White's been calling out Andy Luis, obviously, after seeing him against Anthony Joshua. So it's starting to make a little more sense. So I figured, all right, let's see if we can do it against Luis Ortiz instead, who I think was supposed to face Anthony Joshua the first go-around after the whole Jarrell Miller debacle. And that all fell by the wayside. I have as well. I have Charlo versus Andrade as well because that fight should happen at some point. I know I know they're complaining about 2017 and he ducked it the first time. Listen, times have changed. Make the fight happen. Stop it. I have, of course, Wilder versus Joshua. That's a slam dunk at this point. I'm going on I'm saying this fight with an asterisk just because I know of the limitations of this. I have Gervonta Davis versus Devin Haney at 130, and that's where the asterisk comes in on my end, as you well know, because I was at Davis Gamboa, and there is no way Davis was not a pound not short of 150.
How did I miss that one? How did I miss that one?
That's the one I have on my end. The other two that I have on my end actually as well is I have Kayla Plant versus Calum Smith actually instead of Benavidez. Okay. So that this is close on that part.
I was really close to putting Kayla Plant instead of David Benavidez. Like I have no problem with either of those fights.
Yeah, I just think with Plant, it's a style thing with Smith. Just the way they match up. They match up pretty well on that part. And the last one I have on my card that's different, I think, than yours. Actually, you don't have it. I have Leo Santa Cruz versus Joe Cardina actually at 130. I do have that one.
That's an interesting one. That's not one I would have immediately thought of, but that is an interesting one.
Yeah, those are the main ones that I have on mind. That was my card I had for PBC versus Matchroom.
So the other one we got is Top Rank versus PBC. So my card is Vasily Lomachenko versus Gervonta Davis, which I think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you also have that one.
I have that one also.
Crawford versus Spence, which is another no-brainer.
The second one on the list. Go ahead.
Fury versus Wilder 3, because as much as I kind of want to put in there's really no other PBC heavyweight that would make for a bigger fight, or at least a fight as big or as interesting as Wilder Fury 3. So I'm gonna keep it like that. Yeah. This one's a little bit out of left field because Jamel Herring versus Leo Santa Cruz.
That's interesting, huh? You know what? Actually, that's one I don't have. Strangely enough, I don't have Herring on this list actually because the one that I have at 130 is one that should have been made about 2 years ago, Carlos, and that of course is Santa Cruz Frampton 3, which is what I have on mine actually here, because that needs to happen at some point.
That's a good one. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
This one, I can guarantee you for a fact, neither you nor anyone listening to this show would have immediately thought of. But let me explain.
All right.
Shakur Stevenson versus Luis Neri.
You know what? I wouldn't, because I think only because, well, I mean, Neri is allegedly 118, all right? So that's 126 is possible.
That's
obviously.
why, and that's why. Because here's the thing: you cannot. Some people say, well, he's banned when it's like, if you honestly think Luis Neri can make 118 pounds, you're
what bridge you want?
Bleeping idiot. Hell,
do you want me to say
I wouldn't trust him to do super bantamweight. I wouldn't trust him for that weight either, because he's been over that weight limit, even with fights at bantamweight.
Yeah.
So I've said this for a long time. Skip bantamweight, skip super bantamweight. Just go to featherweight. He's gonna be a lot more comfortable. And I'm thinking to myself, who from Top Rank would make for an interesting fight? And I thought Shakur Stevenson. Luis Neri might be a stronger puncher, but Shakur Stevenson, I think he's fast. He's younger. I think his ring IQ is a lot better than what some people think. I think this would make for a really, really good fight. And lastly, Emmanuel Navarrete versus Guillermo Rigondeaux. Now, if you'd asked me 3-4 years ago, this fight would. I think a lot of people say that fight's gonna suck. But
Yeah.
we are in this like past his prime, post Lomachenko loss, Rigondeaux, who has no F's given, will have a good fight here and there. I think with Navarrete, I think this is the kind of fight where you might actually see Navarrete like actually showcase his stuff.
Yeah, no, that's actually not a fight at all, actually. And it's fun because the Navarrete fight that I have on my list, actually, I have it at Neri, but that's with the caveat thinking that it'll be at a catchweight. There's just no way that he's going to do 122. I'm convinced on that, too. And then Navarrete was talking about as well, talk about moving up once he clears out 122 at some point, too. So, no, that makes sense as well. The only other fight that I have on my list that, and it's solely for my enjoyment on this one, Carlos, personally, because I'm that guy. It's Guido Varillo versus F.A. Ajagbe is the only different thing on my list. Just for a seer aspect of that in terms of heavyweight prospects. It's a weird looking fight on paper, so I know in the original it's just interesting. Yeah,
I like it. I try to see what I can do with like top of the companies and entities for each guy, but that's not a bad fight. I actually like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, outside of that, it was the one thing I realized I was running into a problem with was like after that, like you like the weight divisions where it's like, all right, outside of Crawford and Spence, where it's like what's flip for everybody was at 147 for top rank, and it's like, all right, I mean, you have Emir Iman, I think that's like second on the food chain, or you have Ramirez or Taylor move up. I mean, that's kind of where it's at, and the same thing with 140 for PBC, where it's like, all right, who you have Carlos Balderas, and it's like, well, I mean, you have Brawner on the list at some point. Like, are we really trying that? Are we really attempting a Brawner fight in 2020 at this point? I mean,
no. So, all right. So this is a little bit of bonus one. I don't think you have this one, but I'm going to just put in just see what people think. Top Rank versus Golden Boy, and I actually feel especially proud of this one. Rio De Una Rata versus Canelo Alvarez. Okay. I think with a motivated Rio De Una Rata makes this a way better fight than most people would think.
You know what's fun about that? Not cut you off, Carlos. You know what's funny about that fight? Actually, I really think that was the fight that was originally supposed to happen with the whole Canelo sweepstakes when they were mentioning, Saunders and then Smith and then I forgot. There was a fifth name in there as well that they mentioned now, and I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen. Where they even mentioned like Beeble, like if you want to move down, he was like, because people want to move down. I was like, that's none of that's happening, guys. Where it's like, and then it landed on Saunders at this point by default because I think Smith declined it. So I was like, okay, but yeah, no, Murata sounds like I think that'd be a decent fight. I think they were trying to originally try that in Tokyo, but I think that was during Tokyo baseball season and Tokyo baseball.
Yeah, there was a small effort to try to get the Tokyo Dome for Cinco de Mayo weekend. That's gonna be close to impossible. But listen, Canelo Alvarez, he wants to fight in Japan. He said in the past he would like to fight in Japan, and like, let's be honest, we all know what that means. He wants to fight Rio De Una Rata in Japan because that fight is money in Japan. Murata is a superstar over there. And I think that makes a good fight. I've been advocating for that fight, Murata versus Canelo or Golovkin, for a couple of years now. And I think that fight could be really good, no matter who it is.
No, that might make sense though. Actually, and actually, I think it would be a pretty decent one. I stand by this review on this one. I just thought they were using his name as a smokescreen for all this other all this stuff in the meantime afterwards, and then we get found as Billy Joe Saunders, and it's like, okay. I mean, it's not the worst fight at super middleweight, but it's not the one that one was raced out to go see either. But in terms of what Canelo, where it's like if Canelo, it's one of those things where if Canelo wants to fight this person, it's usually locked in. There's no. As much as Oscar says, there's like, well, we want to play we don't want to show our hand or anything like that. Usually, once Canelo shows his hand, there's no other hand to play. You just accept that and you move on. It's kind of what happened with the whole Kovalev thing, where it's like everybody in their great grandma knew that once Kovalev beat Anthony Yarde, that he was going to fight Canelo Alvarez. There was nobody that knew it otherwise. It's like it was boxing's worst kept secret of 2019. I'm convinced at this point. And you kept seeing all these media releases where it was like, well, when's it going to happen? Well, we don't know yet. We're still working it out. It's like, we're not going to work it out. Just pay up. I mean, that's essentially what was happening. Where it was like, because it got to the point where I think even like Kathy Duva was like saying at one point, like, hey, we're just waiting for the money to show up. And that was like the last thing she said for the fight was made official. It was like, okay.
So I have that as, I guess, my main event. Co-main event. This might seem a little weird, but Vasily Lomachenko versus Ryan Garcia. Lomachenko wins that fight, but I think it'll be an interesting test to see how Ryan Garcia faces against truly elite competition.
That's fair.
Terence Crawford versus Virgil Ortiz Jr. Let's be honest, Virgil Ortiz, he might be the best. That might be the best fight Terence Crawford gets when you compare to the rest of his resume at welterweight. You can make a strong case.
Yeah, considering that they're offering at this point now, if he doesn't take this whole Spence thing, whatever that may or may not ever happen in our lifetime, they're mentioning things like Kell Brook or him moving at 154 to fight the guy who beat Adames for that belt.
Patrick Teixeira.
Yeah, and it's like, are we real? It's like, are we really stretching that out? I mean, just bring back Amir Khan at this point. Like, what are we doing with this? Yeah. So. Yeah, it's weird where it's like, and it stinks because Crawford is obviously one of the greatest fighters that we had going at 147 easily. There's no question about that. Just that, and I hate when people use the word. I've grown to hate Carlos fight resumes. I've grown to hate that. Boxing Twitter has spoiled me on the word fight resume. It's like, oh gosh, like, I use this as a great example. Like, no one's gonna remember this time next month. The fact I'm talking to you right now to mention that Maurice Hooker on that Daniel Jacobs Julio Cesar Chavez card fought a guy at welterweight on 3 days rest. No one's gonna remember that. They remember the next fight where he was with fight Regis Prograis. And that's all that matters. And he lost to Ramirez. That's what people remember. They're not gonna remember that fight happened whatsoever and on 3 days notice and beat him in 2 minutes. No one. But once again, that's on the resume. So what are we going to do? Win's a win, right? I mean, that's why I hate when they because time will dissolve all of those kinds of fights. But no, with Crawford with that, because Crawford was undisputed at 140, and then we moved to 147, and then all of a sudden he just can't make any of these fights. We hear Bob now because he's under quarantine or he's growing the same beard that we're all growing now, saying he wants Pacquiao, which is funny because if you talk to Bob at all any time last year, he wanted no part of Pacquiao. Same thing because he was dead set on having it with Spence, where it's like, hey, well, PBC can't put every fight on pay-per-view. Well, they put every fight on pay-per-view last year, so
yeah. I think a fight Crawford versus Ortiz would be good. The rest of the card: Jamel Herring versus Rene Alvarado. Shakur Stevenson versus Shoeshine.
That's a good one, actually.
This is another out of left field fight, but I actually think this is a really good fight. Edgar Berlanga, the unbeaten middleweight prospect who's won every fight by first round KO, against Gary Spike O'Sullivan.
That's interesting. My question to you is this: that's actually not halfway. That's an interesting fight on paper. But do you think that fight doesn't turn out any different than the fight that O'Sullivan had against Munguia, which eventually Munguia wore him down after about 6 rounds? You think it comes a little different?
I think Spike would be a little bit better. I think Spike would be a little better, simply the fact that Edgar Berlanga doesn't have the experience that Jaime Munguia has. And I'd love to see a veteran that can take Berlanga out of the first round, so I can see what the hype is all about. But anyway, not that I'm discrediting Edgar Berlanga, I love him. I think he's one of the best prospects today. At some point, I would love to see what he does past the first round, because he can't spend the rest of his career fighting, low-level guys and beat him in the first round. Something's got to give. Yeah,
no, he's fun to watch, actually. He was actually on the undercard of the that was down here in Kissimmee with the Jamel Herring Mansaki Ito hard card on Memorial Day weekend. That was down here in Kissimmee. I was there for that. And he wiped the guy, and that was win number 12 he had gotten in about 1 minute 45 seconds. It was weird, but speaking of that card from last year, that card I think was notorious, and it's weird because I wish ESPN would with the archives would put some of these old fight cards from last year back up there at this point, where like that fight card, like the first 5 fights were like all first round knockouts. So that was one of them, and it got to the point because actually I was there at physically in attendance, so they were giving out T-shirts. They had to do that whole bit where it's like they had to run for the iPod, had to play the hits. Wacky card games. They had to roll out. That's where I think that's when Top Rank rolled out for the first time that year the new video package, which they have now for the opening of their fights. They had like the whole Hearns and Hagler on it, and a couple of new fights on there as well. They didn't add Vito Malecki's left hook on there yet, but that came later this year after the fact. But no, it's weird. But yeah, back to Berlanga, by the way. Yeah, he needs to actually fight actual competition that we all have actually heard of. He has been mopping through these guys like the first 13 knockouts in these 1-round fights, though. I'm really intrigued on that. But no, I just thought with Spike O'Sullivan that Spike O'Sullivan actually gave Munguia a pretty solid fight for a solid 8 rounds. He just got worn down. That's kind of what happened after a while. It's a fun fight though, actually.
Lastly, last 2 fights, Michael Conlon versus Joey Gonzalez, and an all Puerto Rican affair that you can easily do it at either 135 or 140. Jose Pedraza versus Alberto Machado.
Okay. Huh. That actually isn't bad, actually. I'm trying to think what I forgot Machado was still on Top Rank. That's right. It's been so long. And it's fun with these cards, by the way, and I implore anyone else to try these as well. Because there's so many guys.
Yeah. Well, Machado, I put Machado in there because he's promoted by Cotto, but Cotto has to deal with Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, where they have the Cotto guys fight on a lot of these California, Texas, the zone cards that Golden Boy produces. So I maybe not on an official sense, Machado is promoted or co-promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, but it's solid enough that you can put him, like, you put him out on a Golden Boy card and he fits like a glove.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And actually, I was thinking this in terms of, I just want to throw a fight on my end out here just because one thing I think about top of my head obviously is Jamel Herring versus Jojo Diaz. I think that one would be actually very interesting in terms of just because what their styles that you went at 130. But then again, I think that was a fight that they were talking about making at some point sooner or later anyway. So it's good. We'll find out what happens with all of that whenever boxing kicks back up. But no, I'm always intrigued with Jamel Herring because he's the one guy I think that could really, at some point, piece by piece, unify this division one way or another. It's either him or Burchell, whoever gets all these belts first. And I think the only way to do that, of course, is to get the IBF belt from one of these two, from Jojo Diaz, if that happens. But I know Farmer has a rematch. I don't know if he's moving up or down. Farmer's. It's kind of funny. You couldn't get Tevin Farmer off a tour before this fight happened. Now he's actually been kind of low key on this, but. It's interesting. We'll see if he moves up or down with this, but no, I'm really interested to see if he takes his rematch with Diaz first. I'm not a gambling person at all because I suck at it, so I'm assuming he's not, honestly, because you would have thought, like, usually when people lose it, I want that rematch right now, just boom, 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 we'll make it happen, and then you don't hear anything for a while. I haven't heard anything at all about this, so I'm assuming it's off the boards. So. We'll see what happens with that. I do wonder what they have next for Diaz then at 130, if it's not going to be a Farmer, actually.
Yeah, it's possible that they may have him do a voluntary title event. I don't remember off the top of my head what is the what's his title situation right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't ruin this podcast with have you look for the IBF mandatories right now. No one has enough time today for any of that right now. Yeah, no thanks. But yeah. It may be John O'Carroll again, knowing the IBF rankings anyway. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It probably is John O'Carroll, actually. Oh man. Oof.
Yeah, so that kind of is our little fantasy book. Again, the full thing you can read on Fightful.com on the latest edition of the Fightful Boxing newsletter. Thank you so much, Marquis Johns. We're going to send it to an interview with Andres Campos. Before we do, Marquis, how can the fine folk of Twitter find you?
Absolutely. You can always find me on Twitter talking boxing and other miscellaneous nonsense on my television at Weak Sauce Radio, all one word. Still, pound for pound, Carlos, one of my favorite Twitter handles on Twitter, and it's mine, called Ego Stroking is a must on the internet. So yeah, big fan of that. Also, you can find my writings every so often at bigfightweekend.com. That's the site I write for, and all we post all sorts of fancy goofiness. Latest thing that we put on there was the fact, and I want to bring this up with you actually. Did you see the story? I think House from Boxing Scene posted it about the whole fallout from Eddie Hearn and Julio Cesar Chavez and that court ruling. Pretty much the courts ruled in favor of the commission actually. So. Essentially, the commission may have the opportunity, if they try to pursue this or try to go after Eddie Hearn for this, in terms of having boxing fines and levies, because he pretty much that fight, as we all know, for Daniel Jacobs versus Chavez Jr. was supposed to be in Vegas. Vegas didn't have Chavez. Chavez wouldn't take the drug test, and then he tried to circumvent and make the fight in Phoenix, and there was this big roundabout and hoopty-hoop about it. And now they dropped this gavel on this, so pretty much they had the possibility of pretty much going after Hearn for fines and. They always say threatening boxing licenses. We all know what most commissions, if you scratch a check big enough, that that revoking doesn't happen, obviously. So they or suspensions or license nonsense. So I'm intrigued on how much Hearn's got to pay out for that to have fights back in Vegas, because I'm guessing they're trying to, because I'm guessing from what I read on it, they're trying to supersede like any other precedent now with that, because he had this fight out of their jurisdiction now. So I'm wondering if they're going to actually lay the law on that down, or just make Hearn cut a check, which I'm going with the latter more than likely. Especially in these times, I'm pretty sure if there's enough money involved, all of it goes away. So, but I just thought that was interesting, where it's like, oh, they finally ruled on that today, where it's like,
Yeah, so it's really, really interesting, and I do want, so again, thank you so much for coming on. The first 3 time, I think you've beaten Sean first 2 appearances. If we're counting pre-recorded media call chats, you've beaten Deontay Wilder twice, who was here on the podcast technically twice. I think Canelo as well falls under that Wilder criteria, so once or twice. A ton of boxers have been on this show in one way or another. So you are the first 3-time podcast guest.
These fighters need to catch up, guys. I'm just throwing it out there, but no, that's awesome, Carlos. I appreciate having me on, man.
All right, and now we're going to send it to an interview I did with Chilean prospect Andres Campos. And welcome back here to the show. I'm joined by my next guest, and as well as his translator, Ignacio Rojas. I'm joined right now by the unbeaten prospect, 9-0, Andres Campos from Chile, who's here to talk about his career, how he's been handling everything with the coronavirus pandemic, his career up to this point, and what he expects his future to be. Andres, how are you doing?
¿Cómo estás, Andrés?
Muy bien, aquí en casa, muy contento porque mi familia está bien, yo estoy bien, y nada, entrando lo que más puedo. Tengo aquí varios implementos para poder hacer muchas cosas. Estamos activos.
I'm very fine with my family. I'm trying to be as most active as possible at home, doing exercises and working out on my own, but everything's all right to me.
Well, Andres, before we kind of get to your career in just a second, you kind of answered the first half of my question. How are you and your family handling? From the boxing side, how difficult has it been not knowing when you could be back in the ring, especially with a fighter with an impressive record who's slowly climbing the rankings, such as yourself?
Andrés, en esta situación, ¿cuán difícil ha sido para ti mantenerte, sobre todo en un momento en que tú estás tratando de subir en el escalafón y tratando de llegar a mejores lugares? ¿Qué has hecho últimamente para poder superar esta situación?
Bueno, primero que todo, trato de ser un boxeador bien profesional, la palabra lo dice, y mantengo al día todo, trato de descansar mucho, alimento bien, y entreno doble sesión todos los días, de lunes a viernes y sábado por la mañana, así que soy un atleta completo. Tengo un gran equipo detrás de mí, así que tenemos todo para llegar a las grandes ligas, como dicen, así que vamos paso a paso. Esto no me está estancando, sino que un receso para todo el mundo, y vamos bien encaminados.
I'm taking this just as a recess because I'm a professional and therefore I'm resting enough. I'm being quite disciplined. I try to eat only appropriate things. I train twice a day because I'm trying to be still a complete athlete. So I'm still working.
For those of you who may not have seen you fight, obviously you're 9-0. You've won a number of titles in Chile. You're a decorated amateur, part of the national team for years and years. For those that have not seen you fight, how would you describe yourself as a boxer?
Andrés, tienes un récord de 9-0, has sido parte de tu selección nacional. ¿Cómo te describirías tú como boxeador para quienes no te conocen?
Bueno, me considero un boxeador inteligente en el ring, muy rápido, creo que acá en Chile soy el boxeador más rápido. También escucho mucho la esquina y eso me permite poder sacar todas las peleas adelante, así que es súper importante eso, escuchar la esquina.
Well, there are three main characteristics that I can point out now. The first place, I'm smart. I try to be intelligent on the ring. Also, I believe that I'm a fast boxer. And also, I usually listen to my corner. That's a very important point in what I do.
How did you first get started in boxing? You know, Chile is not, to a lot of people, Chile is not necessarily a country where a lot of people immediately think of boxing. So I'm just curious, how did you first fall in love with the sport of boxing?
Andrés, en Chile no hay una gran historia de muchos grandes boxeadores. ¿Cómo fue que tú te dedicaste al boxeo?
Bueno, cuando era más pequeño era un tipo problemático, peleaba en el colegio, en la calle y nada, eso creo que fue mi plus. La primera vez que pisé el gimnasio dije esto es lo mío, así que empecé a entrenar, se dieron los resultados muy rápido y a los 6 meses salí campeón nacional cadete, así que ese fue el plus ya para estar el día de hoy donde estoy.
Was it at that point where you started kind of oh, I'm sorry, Ignacio, too. Didn't get you.
No problem.
Not used to having a translator on these shows, so.
Well, when I was just a kid, I was a troublemaker, actually. I usually fought on the streets. So very soon I started to train on a gym, and after 6 months I became the national champion. So I had a kind of fast start.
And speak a little bit more on that. You were obviously highly decorated amateur, as you just mentioned. You won a national title in just a few months. Was it at that point that you thought to yourself, maybe I could do this as a professional?
Cuando ya tuviste ese logro, después de los 6 meses, ¿tuviste la ambición de lograr más cosas como un profesional del boxeo?
Por supuesto, siempre me inspiran los grandes boxeadores, siempre los videos y me dije a mí mismo que ese no podía ser el techo de mi carrera, así que seguí entrenando y cada vez quería ir logrando más títulos a nivel de aficionado, así que hoy en día pudimos dar el salto profesional y con la disciplina que hemos tenido, el equipo que hay detrás, podemos tener los títulos que tenemos.
Well, of course, I always wanted more. At the beginning, I started to follow great boxers, so I told myself after that kind of inspiration that I could get more titles and try to, give my fans and all my country those benefits of having a great boxer in our country.
Andres, you've spent some time, in the past sparring and training with the likes of Andrew and Jason Maloney, who are two highly decorated pros, one of them already the WBA super flyweight champion. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what was it like training with those two and getting to travel to Australia to sort of get that experience that not a lot of people get at the point of their career that you're at.
Andrés, tú tuviste la posibilidad de entrenar con los hermanos Maloney, que tienen un récord también muy importante. ¿Cómo fue ese periodo con ellos, tu entrenamiento con ellos, y cómo también fue el ir a Australia, un asunto que no todo el mundo tiene la oportunidad de poder hacerlo?
Bueno, yo cuando fui para allá, el boxeador que recién estaba caminando en el boxeo profesional, creo que iba 5-0, y fue una base de entrenamiento de mucho aprendizaje. Aprendí demasiado con el Team Molona y con Angelo Haider, así que espero volver pronto.
Well, actually, you're absolutely right. I was a fresh boxer. I was just starting my professional career, so when I went there, I learned quite a lot, both with the Maloney brothers and my coach, Angelo, there. So it was a great chance for me.
you fought in March, if I'm not mistaken. You last fought in March. You scored a win against Pedro Villegas by unanimous decision, and walked away still as the WBO Latino champion, and I believe also another regional WBA belt holder. How would you describe your performance in that last fight that you had?
En marzo reciente, Andrés, peleaste con Villegas y obtuviste un cinturón de la WBA. ¿Cómo sientes esa pelea que tuviste recientemente?
Bueno, creo que Pedro Villegas era un boxeador complicado porque era zurdo, pero peleaba muy inteligente con la esquina, hice caso. Estuvimos a punto de noquearlo, pero no se dio, y lo importante es que se ganó bien, y claramente estamos muy contentos con el resultado.
Well, that was a very complicated fight because Villegas is a southpaw, so it was not very easy for me. But in the end, I was about to knock him out, and I was very, very happy, very glad after the final result.
2020, I think a lot of people looking at you as a boxer would think that 2020 would have been a breakout year for you. What was your goal when the year started? What was your goal that you had set out for yourself as a pro? Was it to just fight more often, get more experience? Was it to increase the level of tough opposition that you already were facing? What was your goals for this year?
Bueno, este año, Andrés, supuestamente había la posibilidad de que tuvieses un trampolín más allá de tu carrera. ¿Cuál era tu intención inicial? ¿Pelear con otros boxeadores mucho más duros? ¿Entrenar mucho más fuerte? En general, ¿qué eran tus planes?
Bueno, yo siempre para donde voy entreno fuerte. Creo que vamos bien encaminados, un poquito vamos peleando con boxeadores de más nivel. Eso habla muy bien de mí y de mi equipo. Tomamos riesgo y como te digo, estamos para grandes cosas. Creo que ahora hay que hacer un par de defensas, o si bien vamos más adelante a pelear un título internacional y hasta escalar al título mundial, que es lo importante.
Well, actually, I always train hard, and I expected to do much more this year, which I hope to be coming in the future. I hope to be able to have 2 defense fights, but everything depends on, the current moment.
How have you been keeping yourself busy now that, there is no real timetable for when boxing returns? What have you been able to sort of do to keep yourself busy?
Andrés, ¿cómo te mantienes ocupado? ¿Qué cosas haces durante este periodo en que no podemos volver todavía a la actividad regular?
Bueno, acá, como no podemos hacer mucho, tengo donde entrenar, que me queda al lado de mi casa, y estoy entrenando en doble jornada todos los días, así que, como te digo, estoy en forma, esperando que esto te pase rápido nomás y poder volver a pelear, que es lo que más quiero.
Well, I keep my training. We can't do much, but close to my home, there's a place where I usually attend, and there I still training and work out.
The flyweight division, the division that you compete in, is very, very good at the top right now. You got champions such as Moruti Mtalain, you got Julio Cesar Martinez, you got Artem Delakian, all holding, 1 world title each. Out of those 3 champions, which of them would you be most interested in fighting in the future?
Tu división, Andrés, el peso mosca, tiene exponentes muy fuertes en este momento, tales como Julio César Martínez, Artem Dalakian, Moruti Matlane. ¿Cuál de aquellos a ti te interesaría enfrentar en un futuro próximo?
Bueno, lo ideal sería pelear con todos, pero no se puede, así que todavía no estoy pensando en eso. Me estaría apurando, me estaría adelantando mucho, así que como les digo, vamos paso a paso. Estamos recién con el título latino y todavía me estaría apurando mucho en decir que ya quiero pelear con un campeón mundial, así que vamos paso a paso por ahora.
Well, ideally, I would like to fight all the 3, but at the same time, I have to be prudent, and I understand that I have to go step by step. Perhaps it's not my moment to fight any one of those three, but the moment will come. Little by little, I want to do things safe and sanely, of course.
One thing that I know you mentioned, you've been trying to keep yourself busy. You've been training in the gym. Things may not be as easy as it once were. But were you able to sort of do anything else in terms of maybe find a new hobby, a new activity? I remember I was talking to the Maloney brothers recently, and they mentioned that they were watching past fights to sort of pass the time. Is there anything that that's not training related that you've been able to do during this time?
Andrés, respecto de los tiempos ocupados tuyos, ya que no es tanto lo que has podido hacer o lo haces de acuerdo a tus posibilidades, ¿has encontrado algo diferente que hacer? Como por ejemplo lo hicieron los Moloney, que se ponen a ver peleas antiguas. ¿Hay alguna actividad o hobby que hayas tomado últimamente?
Bueno, siempre todos los días estoy viendo una pelea distinta de boxeadores de distintos pesos, igual de ahora. Y también estoy ocupando la mente un poco leyendo. Soy malo para leer, creo que me estoy tratando de acostumbrar a eso. Y eso solamente.
Well, like the Maloneys, I'm also watching videos of past fights, and at the same time, I'm struggling with reading at the moment because I haven't been a good reader so far, but I'm fighting, and I will certainly win too in this respect.
Well, I really do appreciate you trying to make the effort and reading more. I think it's a great thing that you're doing right now, and it's a great thing that you've been able to keep yourself busy. Last thing before we wrap things up, is there anything you want to tell for any of your fans or for any new people that might be interested in following your career once all this chaos ends with the coronavirus pandemic?
Bueno, Andrés, te felicito en realidad, sí que estás haciendo este esfuerzo por estar cerca de la lectura, sin duda que hace muy bien. Finalmente, ¿te gustaría decirle algo a tus fans que mientras estamos en este periodo receso de pandemia, algo que tú quisieras transmitirle a ellos mientras estamos en este periodo?
Bueno, primero que todo agradecer a Carlos por la entrevista y nada, decirle a la gente que se mantenga en casa, que hay que cuidar de ellos y de su familia y que tengan paciencia, que vamos por más títulos, así que vamos con todo, me estoy preparando para eso y estamos activos para pelear con el que sea más adelante, así que muy contento.
In the first place, Carlos, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and then to everybody, I would like to advise them to stay home. Of course, we have to take care of everyone, and be calm, be quiet, because more titles are coming. I'm training, I'm working on it, and you will see in the future.
Stay home. I think that's great advice from Andres Campos. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. Andres Campos, 9-0, unbeaten flyweight prospect, climbing up the rankings. Thank you so much to Ignacio for helping translate this with this interview, and to Nico, who you may not have seen, but he has pretty much been the glue that kind of held all this together. So appreciate all the help, Nico and Andres. Again, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to following the rest of your career moving forward.